Cairo that precipitated some of the arrests in Benghazi. It was sparked by the reaction to this video. The video was a precipitating cause to the unrest, specifically in Libya. Might take advantage of a situation that was brought about initially as a response to the video in question.
Natural protests that arose because of the outrage over the video.
You are totally correct that they spent 2 weeks telling us this was about a tape and that there was this riot outside the Benghazi consulate, which there wasn't.
Natural protests that arose because of the outrage over the video.
I was in chronic pain, and my family struggling to make ends meet, food and gas prices going up, even keeping my job was iffy. Then I learned about a new miracle drug made in Washington, D.C. Spenditol. Spenditol is Washington's answer to all the painful problems Americans face. How to borrow $800 billion for a stimulus that didn't create jobs or fix the economy? Spenditol.
Spenditol is not for everyone. Side effects may include a mountain of government debt piled on our kids, a sudden loss of freedoms, higher prices for everything, leaving our kids a lesser America than we had. Ask your doctor or congressman if your conscience is strong enough for Spenditol.
And it's so popular in Washington, we have to import trillions more of it from China. Spenditol makes you feel better now and pushes off the really bad stuff till later, for them to deal with.
Call the White House and Congress. Tell them, stop spending it all.
Welcome back to the Palmetto Conservative Show here on the Conservative Broadcast Media Network. I'm your host, Jim Lee. Thanks for sticking with us. Where do we go from here? There are so many places to go. Many of them I can actually repeat in mixed company. But in case you missed this one, many of you will recall that back in the days of TARP, we felt that we had no choice but to bail out the banks. They were too big to fail. The federal government had to get involved. By the way, ask the government of Iceland how that worked out. They took a slightly different view of banking, and they bailed out the individuals and let the banks fail. Last I checked, Iceland's doing pretty well. Just saying. Anyway, big Wall Street firms are preparing to dole out a not so nice holiday gift to their employees. More layoffs. Citigroup's decision to slash 11,000 jobs, that's not 1,100, that's not 11, it's 11,000 jobs, came today as a number of big banks are planning further cuts to the workforce in the coming months. Fox Business Network has learned. And I'll have a corresponding article here in just a second from the Huffington Post, just so that I can remain fair and balanced here on the Palmetto Conservative Show. People inside Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs say management at those banks are contemplating cutbacks as well. Analysts say that Citigroup's cuts were unusually large, around 4% of their entire workforce, in reflecting the fact that Citigroup has waited too long to reduce headcount, given mounting profit and, regulatory pressures on all big banks. Now, I thought all the big banks wanted more regulatory effects. They wanted Dodd-Frank because, given how they contributed to mostly Democrats and President Obama's reelection, clearly they thought that it was in their best interests to have more and more regulation. But they and several other firms are going to have to lay off because, well, it's just not possible to remain suitably profitable in this kind of an environment with the fiscal tax and regulatory policies. It is unfortunate that Citigroup will be doing these cutbacks just before bonus season and just before the holiday season. Which holiday season is that? Oh, the Christmas holiday season. Some of the people who were alerted in recent days that they no longer have jobs believe that Citi timed the cuts so they didn't have to make the payments. Those evil, greedy Wall Street types, those big banks that are too big to fail, are they ungrateful? Are they ungrateful that we bailed them out and yet here they are laying off people? It's unfortunate. And without getting into a debate or a hissy fit over the relative compensation of their executives, which I have a problem with, the fact of the matter is it is a publicly traded company. And apparently their stockholders don't seem to mind. Those cuts over at Citibank are going to include cuts in technology and support jobs around the world, consumer banking, the company expects to cut annual expenses by roughly $1 billion. And that, it's interesting. Somehow Citigroup can find a way to cut annual expenses to the tune of $1 billion on a budget that I'm sure is much less than $3.8 trillion our federal budget is, but we can't seem to come up with $1 billion of savings anywhere. Citigroup will take a pre-tax charge of $1 billion against fourth quarter earnings, and in responding to this, the chief executive, Michael Corbett, who took the reins in October after the directors pushed out his predecessor, said that, quote, "We have identified areas and products where our scale does not provide for meaningful returns. We will further increase our operating efficiency by reducing excess capacity and expenses." The job cuts are part of a reorganization that will reduce annual revenues by less than $300 million. Citigroup shares rose nearly 4% in early trading on the New York Stock Exchange shortly after the announcement. So the shareholders of Citigroup seem happy about it. Apparently they're not big enough to provide for meaningful returns in certain areas and products. And how much was it we gave them again? We bailed them out for what reason? But hey, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, because everything is getting better. It's all working. The economy is improving. It's all good. If you believe that, I do have some land I'd love to sell you. I know this is probably a hackneyed transition, but bear with me. The government, well, they care. We don't want to leave any business behind. We have to protect the economy. We have to control central everything and all that. The government, they're there for you. We care about safety and the economy. Do you really believe that? Well, here's an article that might cause you to raise your eyebrows. Red light cameras are gaining popularity across the country, of course, and now New York City is being sued after it was accused of rigging the lights to catch more drivers and write more tickets. They're quote-unquote gotcha cameras mounted at intersections. Their photos catch and find drivers running red lights, and New York City was the first to have them. First had them, rather, in 1998. Quote, red light cameras are to prevent the very dangerous so-called T-bone crashes, where you have the front of a vehicle running into the side of another. We are in favor, in concept, of the red light cameras, but they have to be done to certain engineering criteria, AAA New York spokesman Robert Sinclair told CBS 2 in New York on Tuesday. By federal law, drivers have to have enough time to get through a yellow light, 3 seconds at the typical 30-mile-per-hour intersection. Back in October, engineers at AAA New York discovered a problem. At some intersections with the cameras, the yellow lights were almost a half-second too fast. Red light violators who later had to pay up now say they feel set up. If you're timing them too short, then it just becomes a revenue enhancement tool and it erodes support for the program, Sinclair said. Brian Hughes paid a $50 fine after a camera caught him running a red light in Manhattan in 2010. A $50 ticket might not seem like a lot to some people, but to me it's a lot at the end of the day, and so it makes me overly hesitant when I drive. Hughes is part of a class action suit alleging fraud against New York City and its 150 red light cameras. Now, I think New York was just being a good government and watching out for the safety of its citizens, because even though those cameras helped generate more than $235 million over the last 5 years, including $47 million in fine revenues last year alone, and $55.4 million in 2010, after more than 1 million drivers were issued red light tickets, Mayor Bloomberg is fighting to install more cameras still. The Department of Transportation said in a statement that there's been no substantiation that any red light cameras in this report were improperly timed or led to any violation being issued incorrectly. One of the plaintiffs in this case, who was issued a ticket on Staten Island, didn't even go through a red light. He stopped 1 foot short. He stopped 1 foot in front of the stop line because he knew the yellow was notoriously short. He didn't want to get caught in the intersection. So he stopped short, and he still got a ticket. But remember, the reason that it's there is because the government cares about you and your safety. It's not about the money. Is it? And then lastly, before we make the turn here, in San Francisco, if you've been paying any attention to what's going on out there in La La Land, San Francisco, as you may or may not realize, the local supervisors have been debating about nudity. Yep, about nudity. Now, the reason that they're debating about nudity, if my computer will respond here, is because apparently some people in San Francisco actually believe that while you may have a right to walk around your house naked, or on the South 40 if you happen to own your own land and are outside of the view of other people, apparently some people think that maybe not everybody wants to see you naked. Their ordinance, now this doesn't seem exceptionally unreasonable to me, but hey, you never know. The ordinance, which would prohibit nudity on city streets, sidewalks, plazas, and other public spaces, was initially passed 6-5 by the board during their November 20th meeting, and was approved again Tuesday afternoon by the same vote.